Welcome to this deep dive all about silver coins. Sounds like you're really interested in learning more about them, and we've got some really cool stuff to talk about today.
I'm ready. Yeah, silver coins, they might seem kind of simple right at first glance, but their story really is surprisingly complex and, touches on global trade and economics and even a little bit of psychology.
Definitely. To guide our exploration today, we're using three sources: Wikipedia entries on silver coins and the Coinage Act of 1965. And we've also got a piece from MidwestCoin.com about common silver coins.
hmm
Did you know, by the way, that U.S. dimes and quarters and half dollars, those were once made of 90% silver?
Yeah, that's right. And as we'll see, the shift away from silver coinage back in the 1960s, that was a really big deal in U.S. monetary history. It still has ripple effects that we feel even today.
But it
To
did.
really understand why it was such a big deal, we kind of have to step back and understand why silver was so popular as a form of currency for such a long time. It goes back thousands of years.
Okay, so let's rewind the clock way back to ancient Greece.
Imagine like those bustling marketplaces, in the Mediterranean, silver drachmas. That was like the lifeblood of commerce back then.
It really is incredible to think about how, a concept from so long ago, using silver as money, has stuck around across so many different cultures and centuries. I mean, even the British penny, which is like such a classic symbol of British currency that used to be made of silver too.
Yeah, and that's a great example of how silver wasn't just some exotic metal. It was actually a really practical choice for everyday transactions. It had a lower value than gold, which made it a better fit for buying smaller things, but it still had that intrinsic value, which gave people confidence, that it was actually worth something.
So what else besides that made silver so sought after for making coins?
Well, its portability was really important, especially in ancient times. When trade routes were so vast, silver is valuable for its size, so it's a lot easier to carry around than bulkier goods. Imagine a merchant traveling across the Mediterranean. It's much easier and safer to carry a pouch of silver coins than like a whole cartload of grain.
Right, makes sense. And our sources also mention its durability. We're talking about coins that could last for centuries.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sure.
And that durability goes hand in hand with another advantage to visibility.
Yeah.
You could divide silver into smaller units without losing much of its value. Plus, it's consistent, like one silver coin is equivalent to another one of the same kind. That kind of fungibility is really important for a stable and reliable currency.
So we've got practicality and value and portability and durability and fungibility. It sounds like silver had it all.
It really did. But the story of silver coins isn't just about, the metal itself. It's also about how its qualities kind of intersected with historical events and global trade.
And that's where things get really interesting, right? We need to talk about Spanish silver and how it changed the world.
Okay, imagine this huge silver mines discovered in the Americas Potosi in Bolivia, which is just one mine, produced an unbelievable amount of silver. It totally transformed the global economy.
Wow. Yeah, that's a game changer. And it wasn't just sitting in the ground either. All that silver minted into Spanish coins became like a global currency, traveling all over the world on those Manila galleons to be traded for goods from China.
Exactly. And all that new silver coming from the New World, it had a ripple effect all over the globe.
Yeah.
You had all these Spanish silver coins flooding into Europe, which boosted trade, but eventually also contributed to inflation because the supply of silver went up so much.
It's like a domino effect almost. The discovery of silver in one part of the world sets off a chain reaction across continents.
You got it. And this global story of silver is also tied to the rise and fall of the silver standard here in the United States, which takes us right into the heart of the 20th century. So you mentioned the U.S. silver standard before. It's really interesting how for a long time our everyday coins were actually made of silver dimes, quarters, half dollars, even a dollar. They were all 90% silver until 1964.
And get this, some nickels were even 35% silver during World War II. They needed to save the nickel for the war effort. It really makes you think about how different events in history can affect even the simplest things, like the coins we use every day.
It does. But all that silver in U.S. currency, that didn't last forever.
Mm.
The 1960s brought some big changes with that coin shortage, remember? And that shortage eventually led to the end of silver in our coins.
Yeah, that coin shortage sounds like it had a pretty big impact on people's lives. What were the economic consequences of silver coins disappearing?
Well, the shortage wasn't just an inconvenience. It actually made things really difficult for businesses.
Hmm.
Our sources talk about how the Federal Reserve had to ration coins, so banks and businesses weren't getting as many as they needed. Can you imagine going to the store and not being able to buy something because they didn't have enough change?
Yeah, our sources mention some pretty crazy stories about how people dealt with it. Some supermarkets even had to issue their own paper money. It's hard to imagine getting paid in supermarket money.
It sounds crazy, right? But that's what some people had to deal with. There are also stories about people being told to break open their piggy banks, and people wanted the coins from newsboys. It really shows how important coins are for the economy to run smoothly.
So how did the government respond to all of this?
Things were getting pretty bad. Silver prices were going up, people were hoarding coins, and the government's silver reserves were shrinking fast. Something had to change, and that change came with the Coinage Act of 1965. This act was a major turning point in the history of U.S. money.
And from what I understand, the act was a bit controversial, right? Especially for people who thought silver was really important to our currency.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Coinage Act got rid of silver in dimes and quarters altogether and cut down the amount of silver in the half dollar to just 40%. It was a huge shift from the silver standard that had been around for so long. Lawmakers from states that produce silver really fought to keep silver in the money. But with the shortage in silver prices going up, the government didn't have much choice.
Sounds like a tough call.
It was. One interesting thing is that the mint was allowed to keep making 1964 dated silver coins, even into 1965. They did that to try and stop people from hoarding coins. The idea was that if people thought there were still plenty of 1964 silver coins out there, they wouldn't feel like they had to save them.
So did it work? Did the Coinage Act solve the coin shortage problem?
Yeah, it did. The copper nickel coins we use today in the clad coinage, those started circulating and the shortage got better. But you might expect those silver coins disappeared pretty quickly. People knew they were worth something, so they held on to them.
It's like that Gresham's law thing, right? Bad money drives out good money. As soon as those clad coins showed up, the silver ones vanished.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It shows how what people think money is worth can really affect how it circulates and what people do with it.
So what happened to the U.S. silver standard when we stopped using silver? Did we get rid of silver in all our money?
Well, if you're talking about the coins we use every day, then yeah. The U.S. stopped using silver in regular coins back in 1964 and early 1965. Except for those 40% silver half dollars, they got phased out by 1971.
So it sounds like even though we don't have silver in our pockets anymore, it's still out there in the U.S. monetary system.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
We don't use silver in the coins we use every day, but the U.S. Mint still makes silver coins. They're just not the kind you'd use to buy groceries, you know?
So what kind of silver coins are they?
Well, they make silver bullion coins, like the American Silver Eagle. Those are popular with people who like to invest. Those coins have a certain amount of silver in them, and a lot of people see them as a way to protect themselves from inflation or economic problems.
So they're kind of like a physical investment tied to the price of silver.
Exactly. And then there are commemorative coins. They make those to mark special occasions or historical events. They usually have a lot of silver in them, and collectors really like them.
Yeah, I can see why they're like little pieces of history and art that you can hold in your hand.
That's it. And on top of the U.S. Mint, there are also private mints that makes silver rounds and bars. Investors like those, and so do people who just like the look of silver and its history.
It's interesting how even though we don't use silver for everyday money anymore, it still has that appeal, that value that people are drawn to.
It really shows how long-lasting silver's legacy is. For hundreds of years, it was a really important part of global trade and a symbol of wealth and stability. People don't forget that kind of history.
It makes you think about what money will be like in the future, especially with all these digital currencies popping up. Do you think we'll ever go back to using precious metals like silver for everyday transactions?
That's a good question. The world of money is always changing. We went from silver drachmas to paper money to credit cards, and now we've got cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Who knows what'll happen next?
I think moving away from the silver standard also brings up some interesting questions about what makes money valuable these days. We've got a fiat currency system now, which basically means the value of our money comes from the government that issues it.
Yeah, that's an important point. Unlike silver, which has value because it's rare and useful, fiat currency gets its value from people trusting the government and the economy.
So the value of our money is kind of based on what we all believe in a way.
Right. It's pretty fascinating how human psychology is such a big part of finance. And now with digital currencies becoming more popular, we're seeing a whole new set of beliefs and values influencing how we think about and use money.
It's definitely a world that's changing fast. As we wrap up our deep dive into the world of silver coins, what's the one big thing you hope our listener will take away from this?
I think the idea that things are always evolving, from those early silver coins to the digital currencies we have now, money has always been changing to fit the needs and technology of the time. And who knows what amazing new things are coming next.
That's a great thought to leave us with. It seems like the story of money, just like silver itself, is a story of transformation and resilience. It's always adapting to the world around it. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been really interesting.